Okay, so I just want to welcome you all here tonight. Kim and I talked a while ago about people coming onto the channeling group and telling their stories. And I thought, okay, well, I'll give that a go. I turned 50 this year, so it seems like a good time to do it, to sort of do the memoir so far, so to speak. So thank you all for joining me. I don't really think that there's much point in going into my life without trying to share with you what I've learned from it. That's the main thing for me, is to try and get as much vicarious learning from my journey as possible. It's a bit of a family habit that we tend to share things that sometimes don't show us in the best light, but help other people to learn or have a good laugh. So hopefully you can enjoy hearing some of the stories of times when things have gone great and times when things have gone a little bit curly along the way. Because that's really the greatest gift, is to try and bring a little bit of joy to the world. So I incarnated with full conscious memory of my past lives, and with the ability to have intuitive sight. So I could see the David Kingdom, all of the races that I refer to as the unseen kingdom. I could see people's energy fields. I could see people's past life wounds and traumas. I could see the negative spirits, the entities, from word dot. One of the ways that this was possible was because I incarnated into this body at 3 years old. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the concept of a walk-in, but normally what happens with a walk-in is somebody gets to a certain point where they can't achieve what they're here to achieve, and they choose to leave the body and let another higher vibrational soul enter into the body and take their place. And there's a karmic exchange and a contract and things like that, but that's the long and the short of it. What I chose was that I knew that I had absolutely no desire to do the first 3 years again. There's only so many times that a soul needs to learn to not poo themselves in public or eat or talk. So I chose to only incarnate at the age of 3 and let another soul have access to my body and take that ride for the first 3 years, because that soul had a habit of dying young. And so she wanted to overcome the pattern of behavior of dying before the age of 3, and she knew that my guardians weren't going to allow her to die before I needed the body. What that also means is that incarnating with full memory is a lot easier. So I have this lovely memory of being about 3 years old on March 24th, apparently, and being out in the backyard of a friend's house at the age of 3 and coming into the body. And I'd always been called Kate in the previous however many lifetimes. And I came in and into my body, and I looked at her and said, "Well, what is your name, child?" She looked fairly startled, because she'd been playing with me 2 minutes before, and said, "My name's Kate." And I said, "Don't be ridiculous, child. My name's Kate. What's your name?" And she went screaming inside, and I don't think I played with her very much after. It scared the jeebies out of her. So that allowed me to come into this life with access to all my memories. Now, most of us have had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lifetimes. I'm not suggesting for a minute that I could say to you, well, in my 50th lifetime ago, on the 3rd of January, 1684, I was having jam toast for for breakfast, if I had that many memories, my brain would pop. What it does mean is that when I need the skill to do something for somebody in healing or in mysticism, I can go back in my lifetimes and pull that memory forward. This is a skill that you know, everybody could develop. It's not it's not a skill that isn't available to everybody. It's just that at the end of the lifetime, you have to take everything that you've learned and put it in a bubble of soul energy and put it into the soul plane. So you have to prepare for death in a specific way. Those bubbles on soul plane are now what I've put together with the help of Venus to create a space that I now work with my clients in. So those pockets of soul wisdom and soul experience are now all put together into a place we call the VU, or Venus's University. And all of the guardians that I've ever worked with, or ascended beings, any of the tools that I've used, are all on that soul plane where you can go at night and have a healing or be restored or look through the books in the library or do whatever you want. That's one of the things that has come from walking that path in that way, which I find very exciting. I think it's lovely that I've literally got this sort of soul memory bank that I can give you access to in your dream time or in meditation, where you can go in and get something out of all of that learning and all of that time. So that that bank of information is what I have dipped into through my whole life. That any time I was in a situation where I was in over my head, or when a client had come in with something that I'd never seen before, I would go into that library and figure it out. That's all of that memory is there. And I don't think that's just me. I think anybody could build that library. I think anybody could assimilate all of their past life soul learnings into that library. It's not the Akashic records. The Akashic records are different. They're more about your experience and your lessons. This is the soul wisdom that you've gathered, and what you can then do with it. It's the textbooks. It's the tools that you've used. Is all there for you to dip your toes into and play with. So that became very apparent right at the very beginning of my life. My parents owned a pharmacy, and so I grew up selling condoms from the time I could see over the counter, which I think has a decidedly warped effect on a person, and watching the various different mental health patients, of which there were many because we were down the road from the hospital, and studying their energy, trying to figure out why they were behaving the way they were, and spending a lot of time just people watching while I was working in the shop. My father was a very strong man of faith. He was absolutely good through and through. He would have given the shirt off his back, gone to bat for anybody who needed it. He'd deliver the prescriptions to those that couldn't get out after work, and often end up staying and chatting. Or one night he cooked for some blind lady dinner because she couldn't figure out how to cook what she had. I mean, he just walked his talk. He was a strong Anglican, and he believed in living that life. And through him, I got my strong faith in the divine. It didn't flow through to a church background because they didn't believe in fairies, and I didn't understand how they couldn't. So we parted ways on that. But my belief in the divine is thanks to my father. My mother, there was something magical about mum. She worked in the pharmacy as well. There was something very, very magical about her, but she was constantly in denial about it. But if you'd ever done anything wrong, she knew about it before she possibly could have. It's incredibly intuitive, but in total and utter denial, and would fight to defend the fact that it wasn't that way if challenged. But she would tell long stories about the unseen kingdom and things, and give details that she couldn't possibly have known. So between the two of them, I got this kind of spectrum of support and guidance through that kind of higher power, higher belief. So I was very, very lucky in that way. And, you know, two nice brothers and all that kind of thing. And everything would have been very, very nice, with the exception of the fact that in the house that we lived in for my entire childhood, there was a fairly nasty spirit who had the ability to pick me up and move me. He could pick me up and put me on top of my wardrobe. He could throw me against the wall. And I suffered quite a lot of abuse through him that left me quite broken at times, because it just wouldn't have been acceptable for me to tell my parents that I was broken and bleeding, because they would have thought my brothers had done it. It was outside of their comprehension that a spirit had done it. And for them to blame my brothers wasn't okay. So from the age of 3, my solution to that was to climb out my bedroom window or get out of the house, and to go out into the garden and go into the fairy realm, or into the realm of the unseen kingdom through the veil, and they would heal me. So sometimes as I got older and the abuse got worse, I might be in that realm for 6 months, and then they would bring me back and put me back to the moment when I left. And I can remember them saying, well, how long was your hair before? How long was your hair when you arrived? We've got to cut it to match what it was, so your parents don't think that something weird is up. And I have memory of this wonderful time of them looking after me in this tiny little house and being mended and being healed. And then at 13, all of my abilities were taken off me, because if they weren't, I would have stopped talking to humans. It was too easy to ignore the human world and to just play in the unseen kingdom. And they took my memory of having all of those gifts. So I was kind of lost for a while. And I really thought that I'd made all of that up. The man that I eventually married would come and visit me in spirit form as a child. And I would tell mum and dad that I was going to marry a guy called John from Denmark. And he was just always known as John from way back in the house. Again, I thought I'd just made all that up. And then when I got to 19, all of my gifts got put back in. And I had this crazy couple of months where they would give me one gift every day. So one day I could see auras Next time I could see energy fields. Next time I could see totems. Next day I could see spirits. Next day I could hear what people were thinking. It was like every single day they'd give me back some gift to try it out. And then I'd take it away and they'd give me the next one. And at the end of how many months it was, they said, okay, what do you want back? And I said, everything except for hearing what people think, because people think some really daft things, and I don't need that in my life. You know, there's only so many shopping lists about bread and milk that you can listen to, or perverse things that men think on the bus. So I asked for everything back, and they said that I could take my time and earn that back. So as I started to earn it back, I caught up with some friends who I used to play with at school, you know, and they asked about the entity that used to hurt me in the house. And they asked about John because they'd seen it too, and they could remember what had happened because they were young enough to not question it. And it totally just brought it all back and totally confirmed for me that it hadn't been imagination and that I hadn't been making it up, which then allowed me the freedom to travel back and to go and see what wisdom I could gather from it, which was fun, you know, and for a penny. I started to study with my teacher, who I did 5 years of study with to learn to control my gifts. Being with her 4 nights a week and some weekends, studying numerology, past life stuff, goddess studies, Kafutu healing, all manner of stuff really. But mostly just to learn to control my gifts, because I tried to go and get my license and I got halfway through an intersection and I was back in ancient Rome with my chariot falling over. And for me, it was completely real that I had gone back, but it did scare the hell out of the driving instructor. So I decided that I had to learn to control my past life sight before it was a good idea for me to go and get my license again. So bless. It's I can still remember it, you know, going into that intersection in Kilburnie and him saying turn left and me just going in a circle, going round and round in the middle of the lights. Oh God, it was horrific. His learning and everything. So I did my past life study to learn to turn the gifts off, because what would happen is I would look at somebody and on their stomach would be a little movie screen that would show the last time we were together and what was happening. And if what they were saying wasn't terribly interesting, I'd get more entranced in the movie than I would in the conversation. And they'd be wondering why I was staring at their stomach, which does tend to make people look at you like you're a bit nuts. So slowly over that time, I focused on trying to hone those gifts. And amongst that, my father got cancer very suddenly and died within 23 days of being diagnosed. And I was made redundant from Te Papa. So I took that money and went to art school, mostly to process what had happened with my father and the gifts all turning on. And a lot of very cool things happened at that point. I did some fabric dyeing and started to channel halfway through, having never channeled really before, I don't think. And the guardians were telling me, put this color there, tie the fabric in this way, put a peg on that bit, hang it in that way. And I did a bunch. And I hung them up to dry. And I came back in the morning, and when I untied them all, they all had faces of guardians on them. And so I had these sort of 10 different pieces that had different, like really obvious faces of guardians. There was a sort of porcupine man with a big pointy snout, and just really cool guardians. And so I did it for about a couple of weeks where I just channeled through all of these pictures. And then slowly over time, the people who owned them started turning up, and they weren't people I knew. They're just people I'd randomly meet. And they'd go, "Oh, I think you've got something for me." And I'd go through the pile. "Is this yours?" "Oh, yeah." And they'd take their guardian away. I'd never see them again. Very weird. I had a boyfriend at the time who was a very, very good artist. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I was going to say something uncharitable, but I won't. He was using I had a big UV light, massive, like really expensive light, that I'd found in a dumpster. And we were using it for developing UV silk screens. But he decided he was going to use it to light up his paintings while he took photographs of them. And he started turning it on and turning it off and turning it on. I said to him, "Please don't do that. You're going to break it, you know." And I was told to sod off, basically. And then sure enough, he did break it. And when you looked inside the bulb, you could see the filament part had fallen off and was in the bottom of the bulb. And in his spitefulness, he said to me, "Well, you're so bloody clever. Why don't you just heal it?" And in my 22-year-old slight spunkiness, I said, "All right, I bloody will." So, as a joke, I went and put my hands either side of this light bulb, and I started to do a healing discipline called Kafutu. Now, Kafutu works mainly with 3 symbols. One starts the healing, one does the healing, and one finishes the healing. So I started with the first symbol, and I started doing Zova, and the light bulb clicked, right? Now, to be fair, it really freaked me out, but I wasn't going to tell him that. So I kept going. And as I'm doing the first symbol, the filament rose up and went back onto the wiry bit. And I'm thinking, yikes, not going to tell him that. Right? The second symbol comes through and the light bulb starts to glow, and it's just very, very faint. But over the next sort of 3 to 4 minutes, it grows and it grows and it gets brighter and brighter and brighter until it's back up to its 240. And the third symbol comes through and there's this click and the light bulb's fine. And he loses his mind. I managed to say to him, "Don't do that again," and keep my cool until I'm out of sight of him. I thought it was very funny. And then 3 weeks later, blow me down, he does it again. And he goes, "Oh, well, you did it once, you can do it again. You're so clever." I did it again, which absolutely tickled my fancy completely because it really spun him out. And he still talks about it to this day, which I think is rather lovely. And it taught me that literally anything can be healed. That Kafutu discipline, which hardly anybody does now. I've used it to fix the washing machine. We had the fan belt fall off the Ford Falcon back then, and I used it to get the Ford Falcon to the garage. It's amazing what that discipline can do. So later this year, I'm going to teach that again because I think it's so simple. It's so simple and it's so powerful. And it can just fix things that nothing else can, which is really cool. The other thing that I did with that particular boyfriend was I'd bought him a diamond to put in the eyes of a bronze statue that he'd made. And he insisted on putting it into the piece on a floor that was covered in sawdust. And of course he dropped it and couldn't find it. And I came in as he was panicking because he'd lost this diamond that I'd bought him. And so I pulled my pendulum out. Sorry, it's getting too hot in here and my glasses are fogging up. I pulled my pendulum out and I divided the room into 4 quarters. And I said to my pendulum, "Is it in this quarter or this quarter? Which quarter is it in?" And it pointed to the quarter that it was in. And then I divided that quarter of the room into 4. Which quarter is it in? Which quarter, until we got down to a piece of the floor about that big. And then for some reason, I changed the question. I don't know why I did it, but I said, if I stand in this quarter, will I be able to see it? And it said yes. And so I knelt down to look for it, and it wasn't there. And I remember being absolutely heartbroken because it would have been so cool if it was there, you know? And I was absolutely heartbroken that it wasn't. And I turned on my heels to tell him that I couldn't see it. And as I turned, it just glistened in another part of the floor. It just went ping. And I was able to pick it up and hand it to him and said, you know, next time do it on a better surface. Act like I'd known that it was there all the time. Which again scared the hell out of him. And it's very naughty of me to take pleasure in the fact that it scared him. But I was 22 and it was very funny. And he deserved it. So so it was a really fun sort of time of just trying out different things and learning what I could do and trying all sorts of different things out, you know, and having big bonfires to burn anything of a negative nature. And it really was, it was such a lovely time of learning, and I learnt so much in that sort of freedom space. And at 25, I then moved to Hamilton, and I got Crohn's disease. So I went from being okay to chronically ill very, very quickly. But I knew that I could heal it. I just needed to figure out how. So I had 7 years of Crohn's. And every time I thought I'd got over it, something would happen and it would come back. And every time it came back with lessons. You know, it came back with really strong messages, you know. At that point, as you can probably tell, I was probably a little bit too full of my own boots. It's very difficult to be full of your own self if you're having bowel motions in public. And it took me down a peg. And it was very, very good for me. It was horrendous and it was horrible and it was painful and everything else. But it taught me what I needed to know. And I'm really grateful for that. So I had that for 7 years. And in that time, I met my husband, which is a whole story in itself, which we won't get into because it's very long-winded. And it's on the webpage. You can read it later. Cute story, though. We went to go and live in Denmark. And when we came back from Denmark, I got a phone call from a lady who I'd studied with. So we'd come back because my mum was now terminally ill, and we were going to nurse her through her cancer journey. And this lady rang me up and she said, oh, hi. So about 7 years ago, I was reading a book on how to put a curse on somebody, and I needed somebody to practice on. And it probably didn't work, but just in case, I thought I'd let you know that I practiced on you. Didn't say anything, just put the phone down. And I rang a friend of mine who was a Wiccan. And I said to her, look, I've never really believed in curses before, but just in case. And she came over and did a curse breaking on me. And within 24 hours, I didn't have Crohn's anymore. It just vanished overnight. I still had food sensitivities, and my bowel was weaker than it should have been. But all of the cramping and the bleeding and all of the other symptoms just vanished overnight. And we bless. So that taught me a lot because I'd been thinking it was completely something to do with me. I knew that there was lessons that I was learning from it, but it never occurred to me that it would have been something external. So now when I'm working with clients, I always check, where's the root cause? Is the root cause within the person? Is it within a past life? Or is it external? Where are the causes coming from? And normally with those sorts of things, there's definitely more than one cause. But if you can't clear the internal reasons, perhaps it's an external. So that was a fairly good learning curve. And then my mum did die. So my dad died when I was 22, my mum died when I was 32, and my husband died when I was 42. So when I'm 52, just let me know who you don't like, and I'll go and hang out. It's a bit of a habit. So I was with John for 15 years, and during that time, I pretty much worked every hour that God gave and built up my skills. I was running Sweat Lodge and just developing my healing gifts. Sometimes he would work with me, but most of the time I was doing coaching and things on my own. The coaching came about sort of around the same time. There was a time there when nobody was really, I hadn't heard of coaching, and Skype was really new. And so I had people coming to me for readings, and they were asking for the same thing every week. And I'm like, you can do this for yourself. Why are you coming to me for me to pendulum clear something that you can clear yourself? I'd rather give you a fishing rod than a fish. So I started teaching people how to do it for themselves, how to clear their own energy, how to shield themselves, how to protect themselves, how to be empowered, how to find their own bliss, how to find their own space in the world. And I started to write notes for them to take away. And so for a while, that would be a page or a couple of pages of writing that they'd take away. And that eventually ended up forming into a 180-page book that people would sign up for 8 weeks, and they would get this 180-page book of just basic information. What's a guide? What's a guardian? What's the difference? When do you shield and when do you protect? How do you process through all your emotional baggage with ease? All of these sort of fundamental skills that if we have these skills for empowerment, just so many things get easier. So for those 15 years, that's pretty much what I was teaching from. And I had people who came every week for 10, 15 years, because every time the learning, got to the point where they understood something, we would go deeper. We would go further into their medicine. We would go further into their journey. And there'd always be something more that we could channel through to support them on the process. So that was my life, and the moment Skype came onto the market, I had friends in America, or clients here who had friends in America, who said, can you work with my father or my brother or whatever? And so I was doing healings on Skype and house clearings over Skype in the early 2000s, purely because a lot of those people didn't have anyone in their local area. In the Bible Belt of America, there just wasn't anybody they could go to. And it was fun to try. So I started doing that kind of work, which was entertaining. And, life was pretty good, all things considered. And then I had a fairly intense year where we came home from being away for my birthday, And must have been when I was 42. And the house that we owned was on a road that was only accessible by a bridge. There was 100 houses on the road, but there was a bridge. And we got home and I was doing a session for somebody, and they were suffering from anxiety, and they said to me, you know, I wish I didn't have to leave. I just wish that the bridge would break and I could live here with you forever. And they got down to the bridge and the bridge had broken. And they came back and said, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it. Sure, it's just a coincidence, you're fine. So we had to spend, they spent 2 days at the house with us because it took that long to be able to walk out through the bush. And we had the crystal shop at home, and our friends walked in and we carried everything we needed to survive and our crystal shop out through the bush, and lived at a friend's place for about 6 weeks while they got the entrance to the house sorted enough. So that was fairly intense. And we had just got home and my husband got diagnosed with rectal cancer. Now, he hadn't been walking his life path. He hadn't been doing his soul work. And I'd been shown 8 years before that this was a likelihood, that I'd been meditating and saying, how do I support him? How do I get him to walk his life path? And was told that there was very little I could do other than be there for him, and that he had a choice whether he walked his life path or his death path. And I didn't tell him it in that many words, but I did say that he would be taken out of my life path if he didn't start to walk his life path, and that I really didn't want that to happen. He made a choice, and 8 months later, he died of rectal cancer. So that set me back a rhubarb season on top of the bridge. And then a month after John died, I got mugged. So I had a whole lot of money on me that I was going to go and buy new stock with, and I was mugged. And the combination of all three meant that it wasn't really ethical for me to work with people, because it's very difficult when you've gone through something like that to support somebody to get over the shock of their children throwing food, or any of the other smaller issues of life. So I gave myself 2 years off. I said, I've got 2 years to eat, pray, love, and just find me again, and just be single and be me and go wherever I wanted. So it took me a year to sell the house, and then 6 months to decompress, and then 18 beautiful months of living my best life. And I had the rule that if anybody asked me if I wanted to do something and it wasn't illegal, immoral, sexual, or going to hurt, then I had to give it a go. And it got me into some really amazing life experiences, and I had the best couple of years. And just as I was about to relaunch back into seeing clients again, COVID happened, and I got another 2 years. Which I saw a few clients in that time, but I did just really enjoy having a slow re-entry. And it meant that in March of this year, when I met Katie, who I'm now flatting with, the reboot of me coming back out into practice has been really exciting. So the VOO is back open and looking after people, and I'm back doing healing 7 days a week whenever people want it, and just living living life and having a lovely time doing it. Back working with the unseen kingdom, which is the elementals and all the beings from beyond the veil, and just having a lovely time, which I think this is the first time in my life that balance between doing what I'm here for and living in a state of joy, that sort of balance of finding the home within my own heart is there. It's taken all of those experiences to get me to the point where I can really take life a little bit lighter and enjoy life and enjoy my gifts. Enjoy the process of helping people and have a good laugh along the way. I'm really glad that I took that 2 years to reflect back on my life and find the blessings in all that time, you know, to find the hidden gems that I'd missed along the way. And that sort of experience of finding of recognizing that there is multiple layers of learning in every journey. There's the lesson that you learn at the time, the strength that you gather at the time. And then every time you reflect on it, it's like there's a different perspective because you've got the wisdom of the years that you've had since. And I'm just so incredibly grateful that I was able to take that time to reflect and that time to breathe. And I know a lot of people took that in COVID, but yeah, I can't recommend enough just taking time for you and taking a breath, whether it's one day a week or whether it's, you know, a year or a month or a week. I just can't recommend enough taking that time to just be with you in spirit. It really was the greatest gift. So those are the sort of the highlights, if you were. I think we're very, very lucky to live in a world where there are these multi-layers of understanding. You know, where there is the unseen kingdom, where there is the angelics, where there is the energy things. And we're very, very lucky to live in a world that has that kind of depth to it. Where there's always another layer to peel back. There's always another layer of experience that we can pull back and have a deeper look at. You know, just today I was with a client and we were talking about the energy fields, and she was saying, well, how do you know that they're real? And it's like, well, look at all the sayings, look at all the old sayings, you know. Where do you think all of those sayings, like he was red with rage, she was feeling blue, green with envy? It's all the colors of the energy fields go when we're having those experiences. It makes perfect sense. It's there right in front of us if you take time to look. If you look at those sayings like he jumped out of his skin, she was feeling down, she's getting ahead of herself, getting behind, she was beside herself. All of those refer to the placement of the energy fields in comparison to the physical body. It's there right in front of us, hidden in all the old sayings, hidden in the old ways. We just have to take that time to look, you know. And I just think, how lucky are we to live in a world where there's always another layer of understanding, where there's always another layer of learning. So I'm incredibly grateful for the journey I've had and for you all listening to me talk about it. Uh, and now the sky is the limit. I've got a retreat coming up in October, because we were told that there was going to be a massive rush of energy on the planet at that point, and we needed to anchor it in. So we've been told to gather up 500 crystals and 22 people to come and anchor that energy in and to be there for humanity. So that's coming up in October. And I've got, fabric dyeing classes and numerology classes and all sorts of things on the horizon. So I'm just so incredibly grateful for the journey so far. Yeah, it's just absolutely amazing. And for the beautiful souls that are helping me to do all of that at the moment as well. It's life is pretty good right now. And the more people that I can pull along for the ride, the better. so if you can handle me finding humor in absolutely everything in my life, then come along for the ride. You'll always find that I find myself cracking up halfway through something serious because I'll find something funny about it. But yeah, we're just so lucky to be alive at this time. There was billions of souls that wanted to be here at this moment, and we were chosen to be here. I just, every day I think, God, how lucky are we? Just how lucky are we to be here at this time? It absolutely blows me away to be one of the small number that were chosen. So yeah, that's my story as it is. I know there's lots and lots of other things that have happened that I'm sure I've told some of you before. Trying to clear spirits that weren't spirits and were actually German tourists, and various different other mistakes along the way. But it's been a wild ride, and for that I'm incredibly grateful. So I hope that shared something that you could actually take something away from. If any of you have any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, and I hope that at some point some of you can come and play.
What an incredible story. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Yeah. It's
really good that you know what your purpose is for this time, but I'm got no clue why I'm here at this time. So I guess it'll eventually we'll realise what's happening. Would that be the case?
I think, like, if I just okay, this is my belief for what it's worth. All right.
Okay.
I think we're coming to a point in history where the creator is going to look at the planet and go, right, I need to redevelop, I need to redesign this planet. And they're going to look at the people who are here and go, these are the people I need to design the planet for. Right. And at that moment, you will be called to stand in the truth and the beauty of who you are and anchor in your peace and your wisdom for the creator to say, right, I need to look after Lynn. I need to look after Sherilyn. I need to look after Rebecca, right? There'll be that moment, right? Mm-hmm. A large amount of the light workers had that feeling coming into this incarnation that if they pulled their light further out into the view of the world too soon, that the negativity would stomp it out before they had time to hold it. And so we kept it under wraps. We kept it under the cloak. We kept it under the radar so that nobody could see until this moment, right? And there's this feeling amongst the light workers on the planet, especially those who haven't fully embraced everything. They haven't pulled all of their wisdom out yet. That they're going, well, when is the right time? When's the right time to pull it out when it's not too soon or too late, right? And so, when I look at you, it's like you've got this cloak behind you that's got all these different squares of wisdom. The storyteller cloaks that used to have like all the patchworks of different stories.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So mystics and healers often have an energy cloak that's the same, and every patch is a different skill or a different belief or a different method or tool or whatever. And they're just there to remind us, right? And it's like your cloak is just back behind you because you don't want to put it on too soon and feel vulnerable, and you don't want to put it on too late. So it's just sitting there waiting for you to go, now's the time, and to step back into it and to claim it, right?
Is that why sometimes things feel really heavy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And sometimes there'll be, you know, negative gunk between you and the cloak.
Oh, okay, yes. There's so much of that around. It's incredible, isn't it? It just seems to be getting worse, but I'm sure it's going to get better. Mm.
I think that's why, you know, as healers, it's so important for us to clear ourselves and to have many different ways of clearing ourselves so that we're not doing the same thing and are predictable.
Mm.
Right? I don't want to live in fear of that. I don't consider that to be something we need to hold a fear around. It's just a good practice to clear our energy when we've been out and about. You know, whether that's from using the white or the Serapis Bay or a soma, or whether it's using a sage stick or swimming in salt water or Epsom salts baths or selenite crystals or singing bowls. I mean, there's so many different ways we can clear our energy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you find the one that's your favorite, and then you have the others for the other days. You know, you know, one of the shielding things that I really like that the Guardians gave one of my clients years ago was to imagine she was working at Parliament in an office where there was a fair amount of inappropriate behaviour. And they got her to imagine or to visualize or invoke, depending on your belief system, a cloak of duck feathers that just completely covered her. Because, you know, it was all emotional energy that was being thrown around. And emotion is represented by water, and water flows off a duck's back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all the emotional energy would just flow off the back of this cloak.
Oh,
right?
wonderful.
And it worked really well. But the cool part was that when she left the office and she was walking from Parliament to go down to the railway station, the Wellington wind would come through and all the feathers would just float off into the wind, carrying all their gunk with them. So by the time she got to the railway station, she was clear as anything. She was feeling great. She had the whole ride home to just read her book and be happy. You know? And so there's so many things we can do just by invoking and visualization and belief with or without tools that we can use to shield our energy. We don't want to put protection on all the time, because the moment we put protection on, it's like saying to the universe, we're expecting a battle, right? And we don't want to send that out because, you know, they'll oblige us. So we just shield ourselves. We put our nice little duck cloak on, or we put our little mirrored bubble on. We fill ourselves up and stand in our power. And it pushes all of that gunk you're talking about out and away from you, right? Until it doesn't. And then that means you've had a really bad day and it's time for an Epsom salts bath or something serious. And there's always going to be those days, but they become the exception rather than the rule, right? But just keep that cloak in mind. Like, really claim that wisdom, because it's right there. You can see it right behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Just have to claim it. And I do think we're at that time. I think it's now. That's what the October retreat is about, is it is now. That October retreat is about anchoring in that energy for the creator to do the sort of reassessment of the planet, right? That's why we're so excited about it.
Wow. Okay, fantastic.
Is there any other questions? Is there any other tips and tricks and bubbles that I can share with you?
Thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. We do have a Patreon group who meet for healing classes on a Wednesday night, and meditation on a Thursday night. And the meditation normally has an option for you to ask any sort of those sorts of questions before it. So, and normally the meditation is about getting some sort of emotional or mental or energy support. It's about just giving you a little bit of a lift and a little bit of a zhuzh. We'd been using the word zhuzh for 3 months before we found out that it was actually a proper word. Who knew?
Oh, okay.
What
does it actually mean?
Zhuzh, it's like a little bit of a, a little lift.
Oh, okay.
A little zhuzh, just to give you a bit of a lift. But Deborah spent ages looking for it and found out that it's spelled Jooj, which
okay.
A little bit extra for you to learn.
What are the signs that we can look for to help us understand or see if we're a walk-in? Because I've sort of suspected that, but I can't sort of get confirmation on it. Are there particular signs or things that we can look at within ourselves to determine or confirm that we're a walk-in?
With the walk-in thing. So there's 2 different ways of looking at the walk-in thing. Because I don't think of myself as a walk-in. I think of her as a walk-out. Because it was always meant to be my body, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I sort of like to think that I subleased for the first 3 years. Just subleased my body out to her. It's different if you are a walk-in. If you're a walk-in, when you look back at the memories pre the time that you think you walked in, there's a different feeling to them. It's like you aren't as emotionally attached to them. They are almost like something you've read in a book.
Yeah.
You don't have the same emotional attachment to them. You remember the facts rather than the feelings. Right?
That makes sense, because it's like looking back at a photo album and you realize that your memories are really things I've seen in a photo, not something that I feel like I've experienced.
Yeah.
Or actually gone through.
I haven't heard other people talk about it, but yeah, that's right. But it's when I've worked with people who have been walk-ins, it's like they have to take on, as part of the contract, they take on some of the karma of soul that was there beforehand. And so there's always this feeling like, well, I've got to work through this, but it's not really mine. So I'm just going to work through it and do it. But it's a bit like going into somebody else's house and doing their housework. It always just feels a bit weird. Not impossible, not hard, just weird.
That makes sense. That's sort of what I felt, all this karma and ancestral from that line as well. Yeah. I think.
Yeah. So what I would say to you is that it just feels a little bit like that line when you incarnated as a walk-in, when you came in at that point. It would be good for you to visualize yourself going back to that point and then ask for the download of how to be human.
Yeah, because it's like I fought against being here. My soul struggles because the energy is so dense here. I'm constantly having to work and struggle with being in the human body because of the density and the negativity and stuff here. I'm not used to this heavy energy of this planet. So there was a resistance at some point there, I think.
When we incarnate, we're a big bubble of soul, right? And we have to create our energy fields around us. So the space between lifetimes is called the bardo. And they give us a little bit of the bardo energy when we incarnate. And we pull that in through our soul energy field. And it leaves behind, in the outer ring of our energy fields, becomes the soul plane of our energy fields. So we have life force field, soul plane. And then we form a very, very thin layer of bardo. And then the rest of the bardo keeps coming in, and it leaves behind the causal information. And then there's a very thin layer of bardo, and then the etheric, and then a very thin layer of bardo, then the joy plane, then a thin layer of the bardo and superphysical. Now, some people see those energy fields as different, but just go with me on the concept of the bardo. Okay, so the bardo is just microscopic thin layers that hold the energy fields apart. Okay. If you, when you're a walk-in and you come in halfway through like that, sometimes what happens is the soul that was there before you may have had health issues, or sometimes their bardo energy has become weakened. And so when you come in, the level of defense you have against the energy of the world is less than it should be.
Yep.
Right? So if you put yourself back to that moment and you reconnect and you ask for that bardo to be topped up and you ask for the download of how to be human, then it's like they will come through and they will reconnect all those energy field bits up so that you have a greater resistance to the energy of the world.
Yeah, because I'm highly sensitive, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to be highly sensitive because you're intuitive. It's another thing to be highly sensitive because your energy fields aren't as strong as they would have been if you'd incarnated from the beginning.
Yeah.
And for everyone else, that's if any of you don't feel like you belong here, the same thing applies. You can meditate and ask for the download of how to be human. Right? You can ask for that information from the Creator. You can top yourself up with your own divine essence as much as you want. If you have trouble being around other women, or being around women, might be men listening to this, then top yourself up with the divine feminine, because it'll be that you're lacking in that energy. If you're having trouble being around men, top yourself up with the divine masculine. And then that lack isn't there and it doesn't influence the connection. There's a lot of things we can do to support ourselves just by intention and meditation. Right? And none of them are hard. So you might as well make the most of it, make hay while the sun shines, and do these things for yourself. And if you do it and you don't need it, it's not going to do you any harm at all. If you're going to do that with the divine feminine and masculine, I suggest you do both, though, because you don't want to be overbalanced.
Oh, they're pretty balanced. I've done a lot. Yeah, that's part of my life work here. But yeah, but I spend so much time in the other realms, say being in the, and I have to work hard at being grounded and being present in the physical realm. So it makes sense to do some more work in that area. Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm in lots of other places. So yeah, I need to. So that yeah, so no, but I thank you. That makes a lot of sense, and I will do that and go back and look at that.
Yeah, well, it's in for a penny. So does anybody else have any other questions that they wish to throw into the mix before we log off for the night? Other than, why am I so red? Because I'm in a tent with a beautiful fire and I'm too hot.
Arniya, would you like to just let people know a bit more about the retreat in October?
Sure.
Because I'm privileged to, know a bit more because I signed up a wee while ago, but and I'm very excited. But it'd be really cool for others who may not have, read your blog and things on your website yet.
So there is a very cute blog on the website, but in March I was driving to go and pick Katie up from the railway station, and the Creator said to me, at 5:15 there's going to be an earth shift and you need to sit down, be still, integrate it, and listen. And I looked down and it was 3 minutes past 5 and I had to be at the railway station. So I got down to the railway station, Katie got into the car, and I said, right, in 3 minutes now I've got to integrate this information. You can either go shopping or you can join me. And she's always in for it. So the two of us sat there and had this download of energy coming through, and we both sort of shivered and shaked and rattled and roaned. And and felt much better for it. And then the creator said, well, the next one's going to be at 8:36. You better get home and get ready for it. And so we came home and set ourselves up in the tent. And as the energy started, these two guardians came in who were dressed as spiritual surgeons, and they cleared all sorts of stuff off both of us. I'd had quite a bad back for the day, and they cleared all that up. And so I afterwards I was saying to them, you know, well, what's the story? And they said, well, over the next so many months, there's going to be these shifts, and, you know, get as many people as you want to come and join in. And so for a while I was just putting the time up, and they were exact times down to the minute. And then they started giving me guidance. So I started having Zooms where I would tell people what was happening. It wasn't exactly a meditation. It was just like, oh yeah, they're going to do this now, and you know, this guardian's coming in, and these guys are doing it. And then the VU guardians started coming in, and they started helping us. And then in June, they told us that there was going to be 3 a day of these shifts for 6 weeks. And so for 6 weeks, we were logging in at all hours of the day and night. Sometimes it was 3 in the morning. It was all over the place. And everybody would log on to Zoom, and we would take these journeys to wherever the creator took us for the changes to happen. And at the end of it, it was just amazing to watch. The difference in people was just amazing. And it was very, very cool. And they've sort of slowed down a bit. There's often sort of 1 or 2 a month at the moment. But what they said was that on the 22nd of October every year, it's referred to as Spiritual New Year. And it's when we start to feel the energy of the year to come entering onto the planet. And they said there's an opportunity there, if you want it, to create an anchor point for that energy to come through with a much stronger force. And they said to me to create a vortex of power using crystals to anchor it in. So the idea is that on the 18th, there's going to be 11 of us who meet in the Wairarapa, and each person will hold a crystal, and the first journey will come through, and we'll put that energy for the creator into those crystals, and then they will be put into a circle in the middle of the room around one fairly sizable crystal that I've bought, that I'm not unhappy about owning. And then we'll go away and we'll have a cup of tea and whatever else. And then a couple of hours later, there'll be another shift. And they've given me the times. So on the Wednesday night, there's 3, and then the next day there's 8, and the next day there's 8. And then on the Friday, another 11 people hopefully join us. And so there'll be 22 of us. And the crystal grid will continue to grow. With each shift, we'll put another layer of crystals in until on the 22nd, when we anchor that energy in fully and properly. And the work is designed, it's the reason we've been called to do it is to support humanity to make this shift and to anchor in our soul family and to support our soul family through this process. Each person will have other souls that they've agreed to be of service to by doing this work. There's a new group of guardians called the Thoranian Guard who have come in to support it. And that's our main focus, is to be of service to humanity and to help those other souls. But it is going to move us forward personally in a massive way as well. It's just what you send out returns to you multiplied. And so yeah, we're anchoring that in and hopefully having a good time between shifts. Surrounded by 500 or so crystals, which are now all sitting on the couch next to me. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I can already feel the energy building, and it's quite intense and quite fabulous. So yeah, I hope some of you can join. That would be lovely. But it's not going to be a fluffy light and fluff journey. It's definitely, we're there to work, we're there to be of service. All of those sort of retreats that I've done over the years of preparing for the moment when, this is the moment when. It's not something in the future. This is the time. It's now. We're meant to be here now, showing up for the Creator now. I don't think that it's a moment 10 years in the future. I think there will be other shifts that we have to do, but this is the beginning. We have to show up now as light workers, ready to work. So, and I can't wait. Did anyone have any questions about that?
Do you think that the power sites in Aotearoa, New Zealand, are shifting?
There was, so I don't know if you remember the tsunami that hit somewhere overseas. My brain can't quite remember where now, but it was so, Thailand was it? Thank you. But it was so big that it moved the Earth's axis at that point. So that changed a lot of the locations of a lot of those sites because the poles shifted. And at that point, there was a conference in the Unseen Kingdom with a lot of those beings who were going, well, if they've shifted, this is an opportunity for us to shift them to an energy that works for us. And I think at that point, a lot of those doorways started to shift and change to a new space because the land which had held them was tired and there needed to be a fresh start. So if you look at the Rotoponamu site, there is a temple within the bottom of Lake Taupō.
Yes, I've seen the crystal temple. Yeah, the high priestesses. Yep.
So there's that temple, and then there's the other one by the Kaimanawa wall as well. And my feeling on it was that the Kaimanawa wall is actually closer to being what Rotoponamu was. If you go and hang out there is the beginnings of a new temple being built by the Unseen Kingdom. It hasn't completely come through yet, but what I suspect is that we will feel that come online in October and reactivate the Taupō temple and Rotoponamu, and the actual temple will be in the pyramid above it. I think there's going to be some fairly massive energy shifts there. As for where we've placed this crystal grid, this particular location is in the Wairarapa, and the Wairarapa is where a lot of the more earth Unseen Kingdom reside, and it's quite near the sea. So it just felt like it was a space where, with the exception of the fire elementals, the other three groups were really quite strong and quite clear, with an uninterrupted human space, which a lot of the other places that we could have done it had a lot of human consciousness. And this place has such a little amount of human consciousness that it's ridiculous. Which what that will mean is that we can grow the energy outside of that influence. And then when it does switch on fully on the 22nd, it will be able to go through in a clearer format without the influence of the general hubbub of humanity and consciousness. It'll switch on relatively quickly. So for the first one, because we will do this every year, but for the first one, it was important that it was in clear space. And there's many places where you can get accommodation for 22 people away from humanity. But yeah, next year, I think we will be in a different location. because the element of surprise will have gone.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can I just say that's why I painted this painting behind me. That's Lake Rotoiti in Nelson National Park. Can you see the pyramid
Yes.
in the painting?
Yes.
I did not put that pyramid in that painting. It appeared by itself.
Hold on,
Well.
I'm just trying to show
this. Put my finger in the right place. That pyramid in the
I don't
painting
see, unfortunately,
turned
but
up by itself.
here we go.
And that lake links you from Wellington to the South Island. That's where your next link is.
Yeah,
that
well,
lake.
That's what we need. Is we don't have anybody from the South Island coming to this retreat, which I really want some people from down there, because the first 11 get to take home some of the crystals with them, and I really want to get some of those crystals down to the South Island. So, but
I didn't know when I was 9 years. When I was 9 years old, we moved from Nelson to Auckland, and my twin sister and I didn't know why we moved to Nelson, but now I know more about spiritually why I was taken as a child from Nelson to Auckland to Tauranga. It forms a triangle, and the Bay of Plenty forms another triangle, and it's all part of sacred geometry that we all belong to, and that's why it keeps turning up in my artwork. I've had light codes turn up in my artwork, and it's all linking us together. We're all meant to be sitting here listening to Arniya's story tonight so we can all relate. I relate to so much of your story. I've been sitting here with the sound on mute because, the dog is still snoring, so it's not me snorting, it's my Staffy. And I'm like, just having so many moments of like aha moments. I'm like, wow. It's just like opened up my whole world of like, yeah, I'm not imagining that stuff either. I find like-minded people, which is just so choice.
That's a lot of what I end up doing in sessions is telling people, validating their stories, listening to what's going on for them and saying, hey, have you thought about listening to yourself talk in this way? Listening to what you've said, but without the taint of thinking that there's something wrong with it, or let's just take a journey back. I had one guy who said to me that he hated the police, and because he'd been at school, he'd been overwhelmed, and he'd left and gone home and was making himself a peanut butter sandwich, and the bloody pigs had come in and grabbed him, kicking and screaming, and taken him back to school, and he'd hated them ever since. And he ranted about this for about 20 minutes. And then I started to sort of gently challenge it. And it turned out that he'd been 5 at the time. He just never ever thought about it, like he just always assumed, he felt like he was independent. He'd always been able to make his own lunch. So what the hell was the problem? And, once he sort of sat down and thought about it and went, oh, if I had a 5-year-old, I'd probably be really happy if the police came and took him back to school, And often this is what we end up doing in sessions, is just really having a good hard look at the stories that we tell ourselves and finding the wisdom and the beauty and the love in them. And just having another look, because there's often so many things that we just miss at the time,
Mm-hmm.
And it normally evolves into having a good laugh at the situation, because there's always humor in everything, but anyway. So look, I would love to, if any of you are interested in doing any more work on the Lemurian temples or work with the Unseen Kingdom, flick me a message, because I'm always happy to organize a group of like-minded beings for us to go into that journey in that realm. If any of you are wanting to do water clearing work, I have bought a whole lot of shungite to try and program that will be at the retreat to get it changed up with higher vibrational energy, and then we will be water bombing it into water around New Zealand. So if any of you are wanting to be part of that, please let me know. And I will have an advanced healing group coming up because I've got a book coming out about how to clear entities and demonics and all that kind of stuff. And that class will be going deeper into the book before it's published to make sure I've got everything. So if you have any questions about any of that, please let me know. If you want to come out for a personal spiritual retreat, we have a lovely caravan here, and you can come and spend time with us in the tent and have healings and massage and scrumminess, or have a vision quest to go a little bit deeper into your own stuff. So there's a whole lot of little playthings for you to get your teeth into if you want. And if you have any questions about anything I've said, please do send me a message. So I'm more than happy to have a chat.